flash of blue-glazed brick pierces the dusty haze of the Mesopotamian desert. Lions of gold snarling in eternal silence. We are standing before the Ishtar Gate, the heartbeat of the ancient world. This was more than a city. It was the first attempt to impose absolute order on chaos. From the hanging gardens to the written law, they defined what it means to be civilized. But how did a kingdom of mud become the envy of antiquity? Welcome to Civilization Odyssey. Today we decode the laws of Babylon. To understand the order of Babylon, we must first look to the land itself. We deploy a morphing map and see the region they called home. Mesopotamia, the fertile crescent cradled between the mighty Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This geography was both a blessing and a curse, offering rich silt for agriculture, but also devastating floods and constant vulnerability to invasion. Babylon was born in the early Bronze Age, rising in the shadow of the great Sumerian and Akkadian empires, inheriting their sophisticated cuneiform writing system and their agricultural ingenuity. Its first golden age came around the 18th century BCE under the Amorite dynasty and their sixth king, Hammurabi. Imagine, while the Middle Kingdom of Egypt was still navigating the Nile and the mysterious Harappan civilization thrived on the Indus, Hammurabi forged a localized city-state into a regional powerhouse. Though this first empire would eventually fragment, the sheer cultural weight of the city endured. Then, nearly 1,000 years later, after the dark era of the Assyrian yoke, Babylon rose again, reclaiming its destiny under the Neo-Babylonian Empire. This later incarnation, anchored by the legendary Nebuchadnezzar II, established the city as the undisputed imperial capital, casting a shadow that stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. It is in this second, grander phase that the city realized its ultimate physical form. The physical manifestation of Babylon's resurgence was spectacular, yet its foundation remained profoundly humble. We use AI vistas to show the landscape, flat, arid, subject to the capricious violence of the rivers. In this land devoid of usable stone, the Babylonians turned to the very earth beneath their feet. They became masters of the humble mud brick, crafting millions of sun-dried and kiln-fired blocks, protected by waterproof bitumen. We take an AI fly-through that descends over the city walls, so wide that chariots could turn upon them, and tracks along the processional way, tiled in red and white marble. The sheer scale is staggering, a labyrinth of canals and densely packed residential quarters, all organized around the sacred space. At its core stood the Etemenanki, the temple of the foundation of heaven and earth, a colossal ziggurat that likely inspired the biblical Tower of Babel. This step pyramid was a mountain built by men, a physical link between the human world and the celestial sphere. But it is the legend of the Hanging Gardens that truly defines their engineering genius. Visualizing this lost wonder, a tiered, irrigated mountain of exotic flora rising high above the baked plains, shows a civilization obsessed not just with height, but with harnessing the very rivers that threaten them, using advanced hydraulics to create a manufactured, vibrant paradise in the dust. This was architecture as both religious tribute and imperial propaganda. The true miracle of Babylon was not the stone it lacked, but the people who filled its enormous spaces. We utilize intimate, detailed close-ups to bring their society into focus. Babylon was a highly stratified, yet surprisingly vibrant society. At the apex sat the king, the representative of the gods, followed closely by a powerful temple priesthood. Below them were the Amelu, the free citizens, the merchants, the skilled artisans, and the indispensable scribes, keepers of the vast cuneiform libraries, and the administrators of the empire. At the bottom were the mushkinu, the poor or dependent commoners, and the slave population, often prisoners of war or those enslaved by debt. What did life feel like on the street? Imagine the dense scent of dust and spices, the constant, low roar of 250,000 voices. Based on recovered artifacts and tablets, we visualize the Babylonians wearing practical linen or woolen tunics, often fringed and brightly colored. Their diet was centered around barley, beer, dates, and sesame oil, cultivated through sophisticated irrigation systems that were constantly maintained. The city's economic engine was trade. Babylonian merchants, utilizing river transport and caravan routes, were the original globalists, dealing in cedar from Lebanon, copper from Dilmun, and the precious deep blue lapis lazuli mined far away in Afghanistan. Every transaction, every debt, every legal agreement was meticulously recorded on small clay tablets. Millions of these tiny, inscribed archives tell us everything about their lives, from a marriage contract to the sale of a goat. This meticulous record-keeping underscores a civilization utterly obsessed with order, right down to the food on the table. If the mud brick was their material, the Code of Hammurabi was the structural steel of the Babylonian state. We transition from the bustling market street to an intimate close-up of the great basalt stele. This was their true genius, codifying justice. Before Hammurabi, law was often arbitrary, determined by local authority or the whim of a judge. Now, etched into stone in clear cuneiform, the law was public, accessible, and theoretically applied to everyone, a revolutionary shift. The famous principle, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, was not just vengeance, it was a mechanism of accountability, limiting retribution and defining legal culpability by social class. The code addressed everything from false accusation and property rights to medical malpractice and divorce. It wasn't perfect, but it was organized, predictable, and binding on the ruler himself. A foundational administrative technology that allowed a complex urban society of 200,000 souls to function without collapse. Their second, equally profound strength lay in numbers. Their administrative obsession with order naturally extended to the heavens. The Babylonians were masters of the sexagesimal system, a base 60 mathematics. We visualize their clay tablets, showing complex geometry and algebra used not just for land division, but for astronomical calculations. Every circle we draw today, every 60-second minute, every 60-minute hour, and every 360-degree compass trace its lineage directly back to these Babylonian scribes observing the stars from the top of their great ziggurat towers. They use this data to accurately predict eclipses, map the movement of planets, and regulate their agricultural year, making their knowledge of the heavens their ultimate tool for earthly power. The Babylonian obsession with order was rooted in a profound anxiety, the fear of a chaotic, unpredictable universe. Their worldview was a struggle against the capricious whims of nature and the gods. Above all deities stood Marduk, the patron god of Babylon, credited with defeating the primeval monster Tiamat and establishing cosmic order. Their religion demanded meticulous, constant attention, ensuring the divine hierarchy was respected. We enter the inner sanctum of the Esagila, the grand temple complex adjacent to the Great Ziggurat. Here the most dramatic ritual of the year unfolded, the Akitu, the New Year's festival. Over 12 days, the entire social order was reaffirmed. The king, the most powerful man on earth, was ritually stripped of his insignia, slapped, and forced to kneel before the high priest, reciting a plea of innocence. This deeply symbolic act ensured the god Marduk, represented by his massive cult statue, would renew the king's mandate, guaranteeing the stability of the state and the success of the harvest for another year. For the average Babylonian, their personal fate was dictated by the heavens, meticulously tracked by temple astronomers, and their destiny after death was typically the dark, dusty oblivion of the underworld. Even Marduk's mandate could not perpetually hold back the tides of ambition. The history of Babylon is a chronicle of conflict, first against the brutal might of the Assyrian Empire, whose eventual destruction paved the way for Nebuchadnezzar's second golden age. However, the true threat came from the east. We transition to a 3D analytical map showing the massive encirclement of the city by the armies of Cyrus the Great, founder of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Babylon, with its colossal walls and secure river access, considered itself utterly impregnable. The king, Nabonidus, was absent, and the city was rumored to be feasting, arrogant in its defense. But Cyrus was not an ordinary conqueror. He mounted no siege engines. Instead, the Persians, utilizing the Babylonians' own engineering ingenuity against them, began systematically diverting the mighty Euphrates River upstream. The water level in the main channel dropped steadily until, according to historical accounts, the Persians simply marched through the riverbed beneath the city gates in the dead of night. In 539 BCE, the center of the world fell, not with a climactic battle, but with a silent, terrifying infiltration. The order Hammurabi had enshrined was now subject to the will of an outside force. Babylon, the city, vanished, but its ideas are immortal. Its legacy is etched into the very framework of our world. Every time we divide a circle into 360 degrees, or measure an hour into 60 minutes, we are paying tribute to the scribes who calculated the movements of the stars. The Code of Hammurabi provided the foundational template for human accountability under law. This story is only one part of our human odyssey. In our next video, we journey to meet the Assyrians, the first brutal war machine. If you want to continue visualizing history and connecting humanity, subscribe and join the expedition. They are gone, but their echo remains. A line of text, a foundation of stone, an idea that crossed the ocean of time to reach us. We don't just study their history, we live in the world they built. And we are left with the question, what will our legacy be?